Let's get started then today, since our projector is working once again. Famous last words. At least it's working for now, so let's take advantage of it. I want to talk a bit today about art and architecture. This is one of the things many people think about when they think about classical Greece, of course, is the art and the architecture. Some of the finest that you'll find in the world at any time will come from classical Greece. And for example, here we see the very famous statue, a bronze. It's actually larger than life. In other words, that's, I don't have all the details of the measurements down, but that has to be 7 or 8 feet high. It's on just a little wooden box. And here's the thing about it. It's standing there free. I mean, it's not attached. If you were strong enough and wanted to get arrested, you could go into the museum and pick it up and carry it out because it's not attached. What that means then, if you're thinking about it, is that this is perfectly balanced. It's perfectly balanced. It's about 8.5 feet high, and it's made out of solid bronze. Well, it's not solid. It's hollow. It's also hollow. How did they do that? There's a lot of things about this which are tricky. It's called, they use wax in the mold, and so when the stuff begins to solidify, then the wax will melt away and run out of the hole, and then you have a hollow bronze statue with the wax mold, the lost wax technique, I think is what they call it. Okay? But what amazes me is that it is just the precision of this. And we're talking about, let's say, roughly 450 BC they're making this. You'd be very hard-pressed to make this today. I don't know if anybody could, actually. Maybe somebody could. But it would not be easy, just technically making it. And then, of course, artistically is a whole other matter as well. So as you go into the museum, and it's a large museum, the Archaeological Museum in Athens, I would recommend that you go see it. Yes? This was found underwater. There were divers who were diving for, I don't know, clams, mussels, that kind of stuff. And there had been a big storm, okay, that had, sort of, they don't really get hurricanes there, but it's sort of a large storm that had churned up the water, and so these guys had to actually not dive for a few days, and when they went back in, they found all kinds of statuary that was part of a shipwreck, okay? This was one of them, along with lots of other pieces. And so actually, a lot of the stuff that's in this museum, the bronze stuff, came from that, not all of it, but a lot of it came from that shipwreck. Okay? And so like I said, since it's in the ocean, I mean, the other thing, look at his posture, right? Left foot is not completely flat. Right foot is up on the ball of the foot. Well, you think about it, he's getting ready to throw something. So if you're standing like this and you're getting ready to throw something, what position would you take? You're going to go on the ball of your left foot somewhat, and you're going to go up towards the toe of your right foot. Exactly what he has here. So whoever made this had studied the way people stand, and how do you stand when you're getting ready to throw something. What was he going to throw? We don't have it, of course. There are two main ideas of who this is. Most people think this is Poseidon, the god of the sea, the god of the ocean. Some argue that it's actually Jupiter or Saturn. This is the god of. So this either could be a thunderbolt, Zeus, or his brother. I mean, they're brothers, Poseidon. And since we don't have it would be a trident in that case. It would be a trident. or a thunderbolt. And since they're brothers, they kind of look alike. So most people say it's Poseidon. Yes?
You think his left leg is pointing out there?
The left leg.
Okay.
He's standing sort of like this. You're ready to throw.
Okay.
So if you imagine you're throwing like a javelin or something, or you're throwing like a stick, and you really want to throw it, that's the position you would be in. It really is. It's just the natural way you would end up doing it to get more force behind it and more balance, keep yourself balanced. So what that means then is that he is balanced. I mean, the statue is balanced, freestanding. Now, you try to create even a small statue. It's a challenge to get it to. So many times they'll have like a big base, and modern stone sculptures or even Renaissance stone sculptures have a large stone base that balances it. But this is so I just wanted to point that out because we could just fly by this, but since we got a little more time in this class, in fact, when you go here, depending on how you go here, and I recommend you definitely, if you get to Athens, you should go to this museum. It's not on a lot of the tourist routes, to be honest. A lot of tourists don't go here except for maybe come in a special bus or something, a tour. But a lot of tourists aren't here. I went here last summer. I don't know. I've been there about 3 times to this museum. I guess one was either last summer or the summer before. Anyway, it's been fairly recently. And when you come in, there's right straight ahead of you in the lobby is all the stuff from Schliemann. You want to see all the gold. I mean, that's where everybody goes who comes in. They go there first because it's a big room and it has the death mask of Agamemnon, and it has all the sort of gold and stuff from Troy and stuff from that he found at Mycenae and everything. So, that's right there. So you come in, that's right up straight ahead of you. If you kind of go to the left, and then you turn and head down a long hallway, long rooms, this will definitely catch your eye because it's right as you come, it's right, you see it through the doorway. And so a lot of people gather around it. Now, if there's someone there giving an explanation, as there often is, they're probably going to take a sheet of paper and they're going to slide it under that foot to let you know that heel is not touching the ground. Because it's hard to tell. But they'll just take a sheet of paper and slide it there and say, see, it is balanced on the balls of the feet. What would be the balls? Okay. So this other thing we can say about this is that Greek art of this period, the classical period, is idealized. It's a perfect human form. There are no faults. There are no blemishes. Okay, there is no bulges, right? You have a lean, mean fighting machine here of Poseidon, and so it is, and you see that in almost all the carvings and artwork of this period. You have the idealized. It's realistic in one aspect. I mean, it is the realistic human form, and they've obviously studied the human form. On the other hand, it's also idealistic because it's the perfect human form. There are no, nothing wrong. It's like perfect person. Okay, and this is slightly bigger than life size, certainly for an ancient Greek. It'd be quite a bit bigger than life size. So this is probably about 8 feet high, whereas the average Greek at this time was probably, 5'6", man, 5'6", maybe. Woman probably shorter than that. So in other words, this would have been about 2-3 feet taller. So it's manageable, but yet you get the idea. This is not like us. It's not like us because we don't really look like that, even though maybe we could. But most people don't. And it's bigger and it's just perfect. So this is Poseidon. Okay, and so this is I just wanted to open with that to get across those 2 points. One is the idea of the human form. It's obviously this artwork is well informed on the way the human body is put together and how it works. Right? Because those are details. Those are real details to say you're actually going to make this so it's on the balls of the feet. And he actually puts the arm up like you would to sort of balance. It's because that's balancing, because you're going way back to throw this, and you're going to naturally raise your arm up to balance your arm being back. See? It's for balance. So they've studied balance. They've studied mechanics of the human body. And undoubtedly they used, models, used people to, take this, whatever it is, stick, trident, thunderbolt, I don't know, but hold it now like you're going to throw it. And then they captured that movement. So it's not moving, but it's captured movement, right? So this is all art stuff we don't usually talk. This is a history class. But I just want you to know that when people study art history, for example, they really must study this period, because this is sort of the pinnacle of that kind of thing. All right, Poseidon. So like I said, the Greeks idealized the subjects in their art. Idealized it. And I think I'll have some more pictures of art, but I don't know. I probably could put more together. But when we talk about architecture, the other thing we need to remember is that there's three main styles of architecture construction. There's Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. I'm going to put them up there. The Doric style is the simplest, we might say, the least busy. Or you might say it's clean style. That's how you want to describe things. You could say it's primitive. You could say it's sleek. I don't know. It depends on what you want, how you perceive it. But I do like the Doric style, but it is not as ornate, definitely, as the later styles. And by the way, they get their names from different regions. This Doric then has the name of the Dorians. Remember the Dorian invasion that took place? And so it is considered to be the earliest, although the one thing you have to remember is you can't really date buildings by the style, because the styles survive, and a lot of times you even mix them up. Or, for example, up on the Acropolis, you will find all three styles. And basically those buildings are all built about the same time, within 20 years of each other. But it's just, in particular, I like this style better, or we want to highlight this sort of thing. And by the way, these styles, this Greek architectural style, is still all around us. Everywhere. I mean, you go to our image, you think of an image of a city hall or of a court, like a court building, right, courthouse, or a government building. Imagine what you're seeing, most of you, and then take a look at the Greek style. It really is the Greek style, like the Supreme Court. It's the Greek style, no doubt about it. A lot of banks. Anybody that wants to portray themselves as being solid and been around, you don't want to take, for example, in Grayson, we had a bank. Well, technically wasn't a bank, but you could go there and get loans and stuff, and it was in a trailer. So I thought, I don't really, I never went in there, but I drive by it and I think, that's not the sense of permanency that I want to think that I have let these people handle my money, and I could come back tomorrow and the whole thing is just moved down the highway. See? So you want a building that conveys we are solid and we are long term. We've been here. That's what you want to think of with a bank, and not something that just started and is on the move. So we use this kind of architecture in a lot of our government buildings, financial institutions, judiciary kind of things, courthouses. Ionic is not to be confused with ironic. This is not a hipster architecture, although it could be, because it is, it is from a throwback, right? So anyway, it's far too popular to be hipster, right? Hipster's got to be. There's too much Ionic architecture for it to be ironic, I suppose. At any rate, Ionic then has curved capitals. I'm going to show you pictures of these. But they have a volute, they have curves, and this is sort of our typical. Like for example, on our Herodotus sign or frame, what do we call that? We had Ionic capitals, right? Because it's classic, like we are, or like we want to be. Okay. Even though it's made out of cardboard, it is still solid, like the Herodotus society. Corinthian then is quite ornate. Corinthian, ornate. Often decorated with leaves and vines, but mostly leaves. And the leaves are incorporated, say, into the capital, so that you have a capital that has, and I'll show you some where the leaves come out. The leaves are actually acanthus leaves. It's a plant that grew in Greece. It's sort of very green foliage kind of stuff that would somewhat bushy, but it had these real beautiful leaves that come off of it. And so they imitated that in stone, which would not be easy to do, but they did it. So up on the Acropolis of Athens, we actually could see all three of these at different places. But if you wanted to say what is sort of the pinnacle of, or what is the idea of classical architecture, most people would say classical Greek architecture. If you want to say what is the pinnacle of classical Greek architecture, most people would say the Acropolis in Athens. The Acropolis in Athens, and then of course, if we had to point to this one building, most people would point to the Parthenon. The Parthenon. I believe I have you watching a video. Have you watched that one yet? It's still coming up on the Parthenon. Yeah, there you'll be watching one where you'll go into a lot of details about the proportions of the Acropolis. If you haven't already seen it. And its proportions, and then also the fact that the Parthenon has no straight lines. There are no straight, it appears to be straight. In fact, it looks straighter than it would if it was straight. Does that make sense? It looks more, linear than it would, but it's because it is slightly curved. It's pretty amazing stuff what these guys did. And then they used a kind of proportional model that's pleasing to the eye. And that video will talk about it. In fact, we even like that proportion in nature. We like it in people. If people have this sort of symmetry to their face, we tend to like them better, or find them more appealing, or whatever. This proportion is kind of a magic, in quotes, number, magic proportions that we find appealing. People all over the world find appealing, not just West. And that's the way they built the Parthenon. Okay. Well, that video will talk a lot more about it. And of course, the Parthenon is built for our good friend Athena, our patroness goddess, Athena. Athena is, of course, the patron or patroness deity of Athens. And the city is named for her, right? Athena, Athens. The temple that's up there on the Acropolis, and by the way, the word Acropolis comes from two Greek words that we've already said, right? It means the high city. Akro means high, and polis is city. So it's sort of the upper city or the high city, which is a hill, a mound in Athens that then overlooks, when you're up there or near there, you can overlook and see the agora of the city, and still today. So when I take students there, we go up and see the Acropolis. Then we come back down, and right near it is the Areopagus, or Mars Hill. And I take them up there, and we see that, and we look down over the city. And then what I like to do is we come down off the Acropolis, and we hang to the left, and you can actually go into the agora from the back entrance. which is much nicer to do if you can do it. And that gate is usually open, and you have to show your ticket. But the ticket you buy for the Acropolis also lets you into the marketplace, and a lot of people never go there. And you walk down in, and you can see the way the marketplace opened up. You're also going in reverse of the way the processions would go up to the top of the Acropolis, and they had processions of religious festivals where they would carry, some of these statues and banners and all sorts of flowers and stuff, and they would march through the city, and they would march up to the top, and it would culminate up on top on the Acropolis. Okay, then you walk down through the Acropolis. Off to your left, you can go see where Socrates died, the prison where he was held. So they say. It's not much to see today. And then you go off, and there's a reconstruction of the Stoa. One of the buildings in the marketplace is reconstructed. By the way, that whole area down there of the Agora was saved, I guess we could say, was preserved by a guy by the name of John D. Rockefeller. Perhaps you've heard of John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller was in fact a Baptist. You may not know this, but he was. He was a Baptist, and he was very interested in preserving. It's a good thing. I mean, some people don't like him, but he did save a lot of ancient things for us, not only in Athens. He set up the school, the American School of Classical Study in Athens, and he went and bought this land because that was the railroad station. This is the center of town. And he actually bought it up and turned it into a national park, I guess you might say, archaeological park. There's still a train that runs, there's a train line that runs right at the edge of it, but now, of course, this has been preserved, hopefully forever. We'll see. Yes?
I read, too, that he made the founding donations for the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago.
He did. Yeah, because the University of Chicago was actually started by Baptists. Yeah, I'm sure they don't claim it anymore, but they had Baptist backgrounds, and John D. Rockefeller was so interested in the ancient world, not only classical but in biblical, that he started. Well, there is a museum in Jerusalem that I will take Mark to this summer. It's called the Rockefeller Museum. And he paid for that. And he also funded the excavation of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that whole team, he funded them for like 30 years or something. He left an endowment to pay for that. So yeah, he did a lot of stuff. I mean, he in Jerusalem, in Athens, in Rome, he did a lot of things for museums, for excavation, for education. The Oriental Institute really got its start with a lot of that Rockefeller money. Well, anyway, he had constructed this stoa, and they built it as best they could to an exact replica of the way a stoa would have looked, and it's on the foundations of where a stoa was, and it's now a museum. You go inside. I mean, there's also offices for the archaeological park and stuff like that in there, but the big chunk of it is a museum, and the stuff that comes right out of the excavations in the Agora. Okay, so I usually always take the students through that museum because that's also included in your ticket. So you pay, like $20, $30 to get up to the Parthenon, but there's a lot of other stuff you can see with that one ticket price. Well, most people would say the Parthenon, which comes from the Greek word, of course, parthenos, which means virgin. Okay, if you look in the Gospels, I believe it's in Matthew. It's the beginnings of Matthew. It says that Mary was a parthenos. Okay, from that root word, from that. By the way, that clarifies things because in the Old Testament it says to be born of a young woman, and it's implied that she is a virgin. She is a young woman. But of course, the Greek in the New Testament makes it absolutely clear that it is a virgin, because that's what the word means. All right, you've kept me on that screen too long. So here is, and I believe in your textbook you have something similar to this. I don't know if I took this actually from your textbook, but there are a lot of things in a lot of textbooks that look a lot like this. And so here are the three styles that we're talking about. I know you're dazzled by my PowerPoint skills. Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. So remember we said that the Doric is simple. I might call it clean form, right? Notice there's no, this is the column. The column. The column normally includes the capital with it, right? Column. And then this is the shaft of the column. And then this is the capital of the column. If we want to be technical about the terms. And maybe we should, because we've got a test coming up. That we've got a column, we've got a capital and a shaft, and then we have an architrave up above, and then there is, up above that, there's also often a frieze in these that have more, that would be carvings. So you would have a simple capital here, just simply formed, no ornate patterns. Fluted, I mean it has carved, ridges on it, that's what we mean by fluting. And then no column base at all. So it sits right on what's called the stylobate. And the stylobate is the foundation stones that hold up the temple and the columns and all that. So it's the simplest form. And then up above, it has very simple decorations. In the metope, which is up here in between the triglyphs, the triglyphs gets its name because it has three glyphs, has three markings, three vertical lines. And then in those blocks in between the three vertical lines, you can, there will be sometimes be carvings, images. And then up above this, which we don't show here, is the pediment. The pediment is the triangular shape that sits on top of this, right? In the pediments, there's carving as well, even on the Doric. Like on the Parthenon, there was a lot of carvings there. And if you go to Athens, now they have a new museum, fairly new, I don't know, 6, 7 years old, that's near the Acropolis. That they call it the Acropolis Museum, but it's down from the Acropolis. They used to have a little museum up on the top, little tiny museum. They just crammed a lot of stuff in there. Now they've built a really nice new museum. It's really very nice. But of course, you got to pay to get into that too. And but it has a lot of the stuff from their Parthenon. I get a nice view of the Parthenon from there and so forth. So I definitely recommend that. I mean, if you went to visit and you just wanted to see some of the stuff, it would take you at least a day. I mean, it would be a solid day to see the Parthenon Museum, the Parthenon area, Mars Hill, the Agora, and the Agora Museum. That's maybe more than what you want to do in a day, but I guess you could do it in a day. Right? By the way, when you get out of the Agora, you cross over that train tracks on a little bridge. You're right in the heart of all the tourist stuff. All right? It's called the Plaka. The Plaka. And the Plaka is just filled with souvenir shops, restaurants, people trying to sell you things. So if you dare, you could go then into the Plaka and you'll come out without your money and a bag full of something and probably some good food in your stomach. But it's not the cheapest place to eat, but it is, it's very touristy. All right, well, let's take a look at the whole comp. Well, let me just mention here the capitals have the volutes and you have the column bases on the Ionic. The same for the Corinthian, except you have these leaves that are there. Acanthus leaves. That drawing doesn't really do it justice. And then sometimes there's a combination. They do combine this, which we don't want to confuse things, but they'll put like the Ionic curves and then put the leaves around it too. That's perhaps more later form than the classic form. Then the entablature is this part that runs right above that, and there's often carvings that are there of the frieze. It's called the frieze. So it's not Mr. Freeze from Batman. This is the frieze. That would have been Arnold Schwarzenegger played Mr. Freeze. Can you believe it? I couldn't when I saw it, but he did. That's in a very old Batman movie, back when Batman, you could actually hear him. That's back when he didn't talk like this all the time. that sort of thing. He actually had a sort of a normal voice. But you can look it up, Mr. Freeze. I'm sure you are. As I speak, you're typing in Mr. Freeze, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you'll find a picture of him with Danny DeVito as the Penguin. I kind of like that a lot better. But anyway, that was me. All right, so let's move on. What?
Batman and Robin.
Batman and Robin. Yeah, that's George Clooney. George Clooney. Been a lot of Batmans. So here now, this is something I actually bought in Athens one time. That is your sort of standard tourist thing. You see all that little stuff here that's hard to read? That's all writing. Because this is sort of something about this big. I took a picture of it and just put it up here just so you could get kind of the whole idea of what it looks like. Because it's hard to get that in a picture. Especially with it reconstructed. I guess we could fly like drones over and drop bombs on the Parthenon or whatever. You can see it that way, but of course this is reconstructed. Yes?
I noticed that I didn't know that they had 2 feet.
They do.
What were they used?
Well, this is a Roman theater. It's actually called an Odeon, and it was used more for musical things. It's very steep. It's still used today for musical things on occasion. And then this is the Theater of Dionysus here, right at the base. And then right out in front of it, right in here, is a temple to Dionysus. Because this was all part of the festival, the annual festival, where they would have drama and so forth, and they'd have a contest. The Greeks were very competitive, and so they would have a competition there, and it's all part of the worship of Dionysus, and then they'd perform it there, and it would be judged and all that sort of thing. It's like here are the top plays of the year, sort of like the Oscar kind of thing, or like a competition. But then they would actually perform them here, and then they would be ranked or judged. So that's at the base of the Acropolis. That Acropolis Museum is like over here somewhere. It's up on the ceiling. It's over here. If you imagine this is flat. Anyway, and so the way you approach the Acropolis, and here you can see a sort of bird's eye view, is you approach it this way. So you approach it like this. So you come along and you wind your way, and you come around like you used to come this way, but now they have you come this way, and then you go up the stairs. They're kind of slippery. So what they've actually done now, since they get so many tourists, is they built stairs over the stairs to keep the tourists off of the stone stairs. And also it's a bit safer because those have gotten so worn, and they're very slick. You know, they do get tourists falling and breaking their hips and having to send people off to the hospital. So, and then when you get up here to the top, there's a variety of temples that are here. One that you might overlook is a tiny, well, it's not really that tiny, but it looks tiny here. Little temple right here. This is the temple to Athena Nike, or Victory of Athens. It's a small one. I remember I went there one time and it was gone. I don't know what happened to the temple. They completely dismantled it and, you know, like sort of cleaned it and restored it, and they put it all back together again. It was really weird because, you know, I don't know how many times I've been up here, but one time I got there and I'm looking for it, and I'm like, where is it? Where is it? And I asked somebody, so, oh, yes, we'll be back. Don't worry. So, and then you go up through the gate. I call it the gate, the propylon, which is sort of the entranceway. And then after you emerge from that, of course, you see in front of you the Parthenon, which is the dominating feature. Off to the left is a temple it's called the Erechtheion. And I think we're going to see some pictures of this as well. And back here's where they used to have the museum, but just a very small museum. They've been working on restoring this. So when you watch the video on the Parthenon, you'll see that for like the last 20 or 30 years, they've been trying to restore and rebuild the Parthenon. Yes?
Did you see a replica of the Athena Parthenon? Like, replica they made of it?
Of the statue of Athena? No, they don't have it there. You got to go to Nashville to see that. Nashville's the only place I know of that has that. If you go to Nashville to the park, Centennial Park, I think it is, They have a replica of the Parthenon there. So if you can't get to Athens, maybe you can get to Nashville. And it is a one-for-one model replica. It was built to be temporarily used for, for a World's Fair. But they took all the other stuff down, they decided to keep it, and they keep trying to preserve it. And so it's still there, and it has a museum sort of inside. But what they did, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is they hired a sculptor to make a replica of the statue from the descriptions and from the other artwork we have on vases and things, to make a replica of Athena Parthenos as it would have appeared in the front area of this. There was also another huge statue out here that no one's ever done. That was really big of Athena. So there was a big statue here of Athena. There's a temple of Athena. Inside the temple of Athena, like right about in there was another statue. Yes? I don't think we know for sure. I mean, it probably looted and destroyed, perhaps by earthquakes, and also there's a lot of activity goes on up here.
The original one or the new one?
The new one? The new one in Nashville? No, the new one in Nashville I think is fine inside the building in Nashville, but I'm talking about the ancient one. Well, there's a variety of things that happen here. Yes, what happens is that the city of Athens in sort of the late medieval, early Renaissance period is taken over by Venice. The Venetians control much of the Mediterranean. Okay, so they take over this because of the harbor. And then the city of Venice was fighting the Ottoman Turks. They fought each other for control of various things around the Mediterranean. And so during a battle between them, the people of Venice, right? Anyway, the temple was being used as an ammo depot. They were storing explosives and shells in it, gunpowder and stuff. And when a shell hit, then it exploded the stuff inside, and then it blew up. I mean, the Parthenon was actually in pretty good shape until about, it would be like 1700, 1650, and that's when this explosion takes place, and the roof and a lot of stuff collapses. And since then, it was restored. Some of the restoration wasn't done that well, and so now they've been restoring it or preserving it. It has had this sort of human destruction. It's also had weather, and it's also had pollution. There's a lot of. It's a little better now than it used to be, but Athens is very, from exhaust of cars and stuff, created sulfuric acid in the atmosphere. Because the sulfur from the exhaust would mix with the water in the air, and you get a weak acid, but it was eroding away what was here. All right, let's take a look at it more the way it looks today. Although this picture is from a while ago. Here is the way you go up, but this is the old way because now they've got nice staircases there. So this picture must be from probably the 70s or the 80s. It's an old picture, and they actually have reconstructed more of the gate here. And then this is where the big statue would have stood. In fact, that statue of Athena was so tall that it was said that ships way out, long ways from Athens, could see the glimmer, the shine of the sun on her helmet, which was covered in gold. And so we have descriptions of that, but we don't have any of that statue left. I don't think there's any pieces of it even left. Certainly don't have the statue left. And then once you went inside into the cella, which is the center of the temple, there would have been a statue. Now, what you have to remember about Greek worship is that you didn't really go inside to worship. We think about a temple as a place where you go inside and you pray and you do things. That's really, almost no one went inside the temple except for the priest. You gathered out front. Out here was where you would be worshiping. And that's where you would be making your sacrifices. You would bring animals and there'd be, be burned here, altars. And so it's very similar to the Old Testament, there are some similarities to the Old Testament temple. If you think about the Old Testament temple, nobody entered the temple except for the priest, and then nobody entered the Holy of Holies except for the high priest on certain days. All the activity of the temple took place in the temple courtyard. And there were sacrifices, of course, in the Old Testament. You'd bring an ox or you bring whatever you could afford, and there would be altars burning some of it up, sometimes having like a giant barbecue. And this is how the worship was done. And of course, in the pagan temples, they would bring so much meat that a lot of times the temple then would sell the meat. They would sell the meat, and this is what Paul's talking about when he says you're eating meat that was sacrificed to an idol. See, is that wrong? And so some people would say, meat is meat. And that's really sort of what Paul's saying. Go ahead. But he's saying if it bothers you, or if you think someone else is highly bothered by it, then you shouldn't do it. And we have sort of our Christian blackmail, I call it. It's like, you can't do that because that offends me. And then we make a long list of what you can't do. Here is the Erechtheion. So let me just go through some of these pictures in this last minute or so, and I'll post this. It has the famous colonnade of the Caritids, which are the ladies on the porch, the maiden, sometimes called the maiden porch. Here is the Parthenon. You can see it's Doric. You see the pediment. You see the frieze. And here are those ladies holding up the porch. They hold it up like it doesn't weigh anything at all. They're sort of standing there. There's another view. Here's the temple to Athena Nike. And in fact, you find Doric temples in Italy. This is a famous one in Italy. Take a look at it. It looks a little like the Parthenon. It's at a place called Paestum. So you want to see some of the finest preserved Greek temples, you have to go to southern Italy. And that's the gateway to get up. All right, we will end it there. Remember, we do not meet next week. This class does not meet. The German history class, Hitler class, meets on Monday. All right, take care.